please give a warm welcoming hand to Beyond Better Than Bill Gates, Taylor, Yorke, and Alex.
Fun fact, I'm old enough to have worked under all three CEOs of Microsoft. So, from Bill Gates to Steve Ballmer to Satya Nadella, who's our current CEO.
I'm taking over for CZ for today.
Now, this is tough to follow, a strong introduction. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you to everyone that has stayed around for the last panel, the last session of the night here. We're really excited. Yes, I love that. Woo! We're really excited to be here. We're going to be talking about redefining brand identities with NFTs. So we'll talk about really what we've seen in the space with brands and how they've been using NFTs, what we think opportunities in the future are, and any kind of tips for success from our panelists. We'll kick off with a quick round of introductions, and then we'll get into the good stuff. I can kick us off. My name's Taylor O'Malley. I'm a senior program manager at Microsoft. I've been working in the blockchain space for the better part of the last 5 years, primarily in enterprise blockchain, working on enterprise blockchain projects. I'm also very passionate about the education side of Web3, learning all I can about this space. So a couple years ago, I actually joined SheFi, which is an initiative to educate more women about Web3. And I just love the opportunity to dive in, learn so much about this space. I hung around there, I stayed on as a core contributor, and now I educate more women myself about Web3, and I just love getting more people involved and engaged in everything that's going on in this space. One of the reasons I'm really excited to be here with you all today.
Awesome, Taylor.
Hi guys, my name is Alex. I'm currently with Binance under the BNB chain. I do business development for them. I'm still in university right now, actually. I go to Bentley University, just getting my degree in economics with a double major in philosophy. I also co-founded the Bentley Blockchain Association, which is a university campus, university association on our campus that's dedicated to a borderless blockchain education for all of our students. We teach them how to code, Solidity, get familiar with all the different blockchains out there, build projects, and we encourage networking with as many industry professionals as well.
Nice, welcome. My name is Yorke Rhodes. I've actually been in the blockchain space since 2015. When I fell down the rabbit hole, I was actually working at Microsoft for about 6 months at the time, and so I decided that if I was going to stay at Microsoft, I had to make sure that Microsoft would actually have a journey in blockchain and Web3 and cross the chasm eventually. And I think after pushing large boulders up the hill for the last 6.5 years, I think we might finally be there. Which is a good thing. And I think largely that really is due to what we're hearing from our customers, who are many of the large brands that you would expect across industries. In my journey, I've had essentially 3 different roles in blockchain at Microsoft. I started out in a partnering role where we worked with blockchain partners. I moved into blockchain engineering team where we had a portfolio of different products from developer tooling to services in the cloud to other products. And then about 2 years ago, I was actually recruited to take over one of our production blockchain use cases at Microsoft, which was in the cloud supply chain. And the reason this was interesting to me was because it was a first-party use case at Microsoft where we would have the opportunity from an engineering perspective to really make all the decisions, right, about what should the technology look like, what are the choices we will use, and that's been 2 years now on that journey. It's been a pretty amazing journey. Part of the reason why it's an amazing project is Microsoft Cloud makes about $60 billion in revenue per year. This particular project is a commodities inventory traceability project where we have codified high-value inventory, which also happens to be volatile in price. That's why we call them commodities. And that inventory is actually codified as NFTs, right? And so we're not doing this on public blockchain, but we're using essentially a full Web3 stack in a private context. And just for size, there's $21 billion of commodities NFTs actually minted and traced every year which essentially maps to our business that we're working on. So it's a pretty significant use case, which is really why I decided it was an important thing to do. And we got a lot of amazing learning from that in terms of how do you build a full stack application from the core of blockchain all the way up through an API that's relevant in a business context. So really interesting learnings, and actually brought Taylor onto that team about a year ago, and we're just looking towards the future now in terms of Web3. So.
Yeah, so we joked if Alex wasn't here, you all would watch me be having a one-on-one with my manager today. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. So I think, as we all know, the NFT market has really blown up over the past couple of years. And really, with the past year, we've seen a lot of brands entering the space. And we've heard from a lot of brands even here today about the really interesting strategies that they've been doing with NFTs. Alex, I know you've been watching this space really closely. Do you want to kick us off just by talking about what some of the most interesting NFT use cases you've seen from brands, and maybe what some of the limitations are?
Sure. So I'll talk about 2 use cases. I'm really passionate about the creator economy, by the way. So anything fashion, anything gaming, I'm all for it. And I'll also talk about another industry, the automotive industry, still in its early stages. But when I've been following up on this past year and even the past month, it's been interesting to see that luxury fashion companies, as we all know, like Gucci, Prada, Louis Vuitton, they've all been putting their step forward and really trying to get into the space. So what they've done with these NFTs are really, it's either for sustainability, for digital fashion, when there's a lot of outrage or where there's a lot of debates about the sustainability of physical clothing, a lot of these brands are seeming to now take the stance that, these NFTs, these digital fashion, these digital items, digital clothing, it really helps fix that sustainability problem, because the supply chain of minting that digital fashion NFT is really small compared to the supply chain of a physical product. And we've seen experimentation with these NFTs, not being just for a fandom base, but if we compare it to Louis Vuitton and all these other luxury fashion brands, they've been creating their own games. As most of us are familiar, Louis the Game, that came out last year, that had a lot of in-game Beeple NFTs, and it created this whole entire world. And I really think that these brands are doing it for retail, to include retail gamification strategies, but I guess everyone is starting to realize how important brand loyalty and brand awareness is right now. Even though this may not be a long-term strategy for a lot of these companies, it's really important to show that they are not just a Web2 company that's just going to stay traditional, but rather they're using this opportunity to show that, okay, this is where we are now. We're innovating, we're experimenting with this disruptive technology, and it's also appealing to a younger audience as well. We've seen with Burberry, with their shark and everything. We've seen so many different ways that brands are getting into this. When we talk about the automotive industry, I've seen an NFT use case with Alfa Romeo, and they've been linking their NFTs to the Tonali SUVs, and it's been keeping track of every single data from the car, so mileage, accidents, speeding, all of that. So this NFT would be uniquely linked to that individual SUV. So if there was any time that the owner wanted to do a resale, etc., it would have that authentic and genuine car data stored on the blockchain.
That was so many examples. No, I agree with you. I think there's in innovative technologies, and which obviously Web3 is, there's always a place where brands and brand marketers want to step into it just to get that cachet of doing that. But I also think that the other thing that you brought up, which is really important, is there's an opportunity for brands that are not showing up in digital spheres, broadly metaverse of all different types, where they've just lost the brand affinity, right, and the brand loyalty with consumers. And actually, there's data that bears this. I think it was a McKinsey study said about 75% of consumers in the last 2 years have tried a new brand, actually purchased a new brand, and that 75% of consumers expect to continue that behavior going forward. So that is erosion of brand loyalty. And part of that is because of the pandemic, right? We have less reason to wear a logoed, expensive handbag, right? When we're in the metaverse, because there's no way for it to show up, right? So I think some of these forward-thinking brands like Gucci and Nike, that's one of the ways that they're thinking about it. Like, this is a place they have to be. And then if you sort of think about why is Web3 relevant in that, it's relevant because of the concept of digital ownership, right? Which is completely different than the walled garden experiences that you get in Fortnite and Roblox and non-Web3 metaverse environments.
So Yorke, you're touching on this a little bit, but I want to dig into it a little bit more. I know you've spent a lot of time thinking about what is the future state here. So what do you think the long-term opportunity for brands is when it comes to Web3, metaverse, and then specifically NFTs?
Well, I think we're just scratching the surface on what brands are doing. I mean, we just named maybe on one hand, right? Like the main brands that are actually really aping into the space and doing relevant things. So I think digital goods is a whole new category of goods. And I think we'll continue to see that grow. And whether those digital goods are resellable speculative assets, or whether they're fixed price, or whether they're not resellable, that's all kinds of design landscape that hasn't even been explored yet, right? And so there's a lot of opportunity there. And the point that I made before, I think, is something that I talk about a lot, which is the metaverse we really want to see is the metaverse that has Web3 as a core piece of it. And that actually takes us past where we are today with all these different walled gardens, whether it's social media platforms or whether it's metaverse platforms where, if you're a parent, your kids are probably asking you for V-Bucks to buy stuff in Fortnite, right? And the stuff is basically stuck in Fortnite, right? Even though you might have bought a concert T-shirt, right? So that's kind of problematic, and I think that consumers and brands are very aware of that, and so I think we'll see this whole technology landscape continue to support this new openness that we expect to see as Web3 people.
Awesome. All right, so we've talked a little bit about what we're seeing now when it comes to brands using NFTs, what some opportunities are in the future. So with both of those things in mind, my question for either of you can take this is, do you think that every brand should have an NFT strategy? And if so, in what time frame?
Sure, so I'll take this first. I don't think every brand should have a Web3 strategy. I've seen very successful experiments if we compare it to like an NFT community versus a Patreon community, and Patreon being YouTube, Web2. It's actually quite interesting to see that a Patreon community is pretty much doing the same thing, having their own Discord, having their own entire group of members, having their own events, and really supporting the creators, supporting the brand through a Web2 strategy, just like that. I don't think the answers are going to be strictly Web3. I don't think the answer to everything is going to be NFTs and crypto. I think it's important for brands to understand their customer base first, where they want to see themselves in the future, and really try to make sense if this technology does make sense to them. I think Web2 companies are not going to completely redefine themselves as Web3, but I think they're going to start using Web3 tools to get some exposure into it. That's just my personal opinion.
Well, I could probably argue both sides of that as well. The sort of the parallel historical example is like AR, VR, right? And if you're in marketing, the year of AR, VR has been happening for the last 12 years, right? And so you could ask the same question: should every brand have an AR, VR strategy, right? And I agree it's a completely different example, because my belief is that Web3 is a core restructuring of the internet in terms of some of the things that were big gaps in the internet, whereas AR, VR is just a veneer, right, an experience layer and a canvas. But as you sort of advise brands, you would do it in the same way as an agency when you think about that. And so, like, I always say that, like, I think it's very relevant for consumer products, goods broadly. It's probably not relevant for pharmaceutical companies because I can't really imagine a use case except for drug traceability, which is not a consumer-facing experience generally. So yeah, I mean, I think from a if you take folks like Nike and Gucci and others as the bleeding edge innovators, then I think you can sort of look back and translate from, does that mean that every consumer product goods fashion company needs to be doing something? And, so what is the imperative there? I mean, I do think that the imperative is loyalty and the erosion of loyalty that's happened because of the digital experiences that we have. And it's very similar to having been in mobile. It's very similar to what happened when we went from large screen devices as consumers to mobile devices. There was a huge brand erosion just because the canvas got very small. And so this is very similar type of behavior that's happened with consumers and the digital experiences. I also think that Web3 is really at the beginning of the journey, and there's so much design landscape that we just haven't even thought about.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think for some industries, the opportunity is very obvious, right? We see a lot in media and entertainment. You talked about fashion. For other industries, maybe as we've seen things now, it's less obvious, but we're scratching the surface. So it will be really interesting to see how the space continues to evolve and how other industries enter based on that.
I also think one other thing, Taylor, related to that is very recently we've seen a lot of major agencies sort of reveal that they have Web3 divisions. And where most brands go to when they don't know what to do is their agencies. So that is actually going to proliferate like just the activity that's going on in the brand space as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. So for brands who have yet to enter this space, but maybe they're thinking about it, maybe they're defining their strategies, what would be your tips for success for how to build a successful NFT strategy? And Alex, you said in your last comment about kind of knowing your customers. I think that's definitely one of them. What else would you add?
I would say all brands, no matter what industry you're in or what category you're in, you need to have an education piece to it as well. What I've seen is a lot of Web 2 people are very scared to come into the Web 3 space because there is a lack of education. And it's very easy to focus and get caught up on the bad things that are happening in the space, right? There's not enough videos or there's not enough emphasis on security, phishing attacks, whatever. No one really emphasizes two-factor authentication, not just using your cell phone number, but using an authenticator or a physical drive. And there's a lot of steps in order to even get this NFT from the brand that you want. And a lot of people are going to get confused about what the utility for it is, where you guys can use it, how to open a MetaMask, what is a blockchain. We have to dumb it down to the most basics of the basics and build from there. I think that is going to be a major part that brands are going to have to fix. And I think the only way that brands can fix that quite really is just releasing it and then just grabbing them. So grabbing your consumers, and in order to access this product, you have to do this and you have to follow these steps, and these people will learn along the way. But that's just my opinion. But a lot of other brands and a lot of other companies will definitely have to tackle this education part.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a requirement, but I also think brands should be pushing back on technologists and saying, we cannot do this without these 5 qualities. Right, and we've seen that pretty hard actually in the sustainability space. I think that the security attack surface is really important, and there's some very obvious things. You mentioned phishing attacks and the other types of scan a QR code, empty your wallet attacks, et cetera, et cetera. Those things need to be fixed, and I think brands need to really take a stand on those and just push back on technology providers, large and small, about that. And because that will make technology providers actually fix the problems, right? And it's pretty obvious what the problems are. And we've been talking, I think I talked at an Ethereal conference in 2019, and one of the slides at the end of my presentation was, we have some problems. And it was basically key backup recovery, right? And we still have that problem. It hasn't really been fixed, right? So I mean, we need to do better, and brands need to hold us to account. So.
No, I think that's great. So know your customer, know what they want, what resonates with them, and then what they need, and be prepared to provide that for them, whether that's education to bring them onto the space successfully, or choosing the right technology that will provide them those capabilities to kind of meet them where they are. All right, well, we are at time. Any closing thoughts from either of you?
Just a reminder, I'm not Bill Gates.
Thank you all again so much for hanging out with us, and hope you enjoyed the panel.